Now with Drake, after placing his entire value and identity as a rapper around being the guy who always pulled in the highest numbers, and even when his new album SSS For You did so bad that it did about half of what every recent Drake album has in its first week, it still became his 14th #1 album overall, so Drake could hold his head high and at least try to act like everything was alright after just the third week of SSS For You being out. It is not standing at the top of the charts like Drake albums used to when he was actually decent and well liked, but the album has managed to fall to a point where it didn't even move 1,000 copies within a week, which while it is the streaming era, keep in mind that Kendrick Lamar is still moving thousands of copies of GNX as we speak, and now solidifying just how much of a failure this album has been for Drake. It didn't just lose a top spot on the charts to whatever new record has come out like the way the industry generally works, but Drake's failure has been solidified by losing to none other than Kendrick Lamar's GNX on week 15 for this spot, and now because of this, Drake is not just in shambles, but he is starting to move away from this entire album that he dropped, and is admitting that it is one of the worst things he has ever done. And now before we go any further into this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and as the Drake fans are not going to want you to hear this one because he's really doing so bad, be sure to leave that like so everybody can see how Drake is not even defending the album that they are trying to convince themselves are good. And so with that said, when it comes to Drake and the sad excuse of a record that is SSS For You, I mean, for Drake to now have to exist within a music world where the third week of his brand new album being out is so useless that it is losing to a months-old album from the rapper that ended his career. And at this point, Drake, OVO, and his stans can't even blame Kendrick's success over him on the Super Bowl because we are well past that, and these records are now just standing for themselves more than they ever have. In its entirety, when we put this together, we have now seen the full effects of this beef and where hip-hop and the music industry is headed, which is showing that the shift that Kendrick Lamar has started in the genre is greater than we could have ever imagined. Because to not just have all-time great songs on the charts, but an entire cohesive album that people are listening to so much that even album tracks are breaking records, altogether that is just mind-boggling and speaks to the level of artistry that only Kendrick Lamar has been able to achieve right now. Because to stand in an industry where from Drake to so many other acts, the biggest names in music have done everything to boost their numbers and make their albums last on the charts, and yet the 12-song surprise album of Kendrick's just went #1 again after being out for this long. I mean, once again, Kendrick is pushing hip-hop forward by redefining and reinventing what longevity for a body of work can look like in the streaming era just by making an actual quality album. And now because of all of this success, first off, Drake has been in shambles over the fact that GNX is still outperforming SSS For You, because all week on his little plot twist page, he has seemingly been trying to take down Kendrick and the album by sharing multiple things that are trying to laugh at what this record is doing in comparison to his. And really, with how desperate Drake is getting, it's honestly laughable. And now one of the things Drake shared was a video of a woman from the club Area 29, which he references over and over again in his music instead of actually facing the reality of where he should be and what he should be doing to move forward as an artist. And in typical Drake fashion, he shared a video where one of the dancers who he seemingly mentioned by name on his song Gimme a Hug was holding a dictionary in her hand, which of course this is a reference to the line Drake said on that track, where he was saying that because Kendrick Lamar is on top of the rap game right now, that people need to dance with dictionaries because the music is so complex and it's not as fun as he used to make it. And while Drake was trying to keep everyone down and making them feel a way for enjoying music with substance, clearly this line and the message he has been trying to make fun of Kendrick Lamar and his listeners with has not worked whatsoever, because people are still pulling out all those dictionaries and letting that entire GNX album play all the way to the point where its 12-15-week-old songs are outperforming the entire 21-song album's worth of material that Drake just put out on streaming services. And now Drake's final push to make SSS For You do good didn't stop there, as he also shared another video where a fan was telling everybody to stay on the side where Kendrick Lamar is doing stuff like his ad-libs on Peekaboo, while we have to listen to Kendrick saying boom bop bam. They are gonna have fun with Drake records like Nokia, and I mean again with Drake here. While he is trying to make SSS For You look like it's something special and is trying to clown Kendrick Lamar and even the little fun parts of GNX, which again, if you actually just appreciated hip-hop and just fun and enjoyable music, you would have no problem with Kendrick Lamar giving a performance that is just as entertaining and even funny at times as it is complex. Now we are unsurprisingly seeing that all of these little games did not work for Drake whatsoever. And now because of this more than ever, Drake is now at a point where he has to accept that he is no longer the numbers guy and that he can't put everybody else down anymore because he is not in a place where nobody else can reach him, and because of this. Now we are seeing that all of this didn't work, and Drake is now at a point where he has to accept that he is no longer the numbers guy. And now because of this, he can't just dismiss every single person and try to put them down because Kendrick has him wiped down no matter what he wants to say, and because of this, now as Drake really has to cope with the fact that he failed. He is doing what he does best, which is of course try and avoid what's actually happening and accepting it, and is really now trying to make excuses to say why this album failed, but still, despite its failure, why his career is in a good place. And now what we are seeing from Drake and OVO here is that beyond the claims that this album is suppressed and it had no support, which really seems like an excuse to talk about why the numbers on this thing were so low, Drake did everything he could to set this album right up in a place where he can push it out of the rest of his main catalog if it fails, which we are now seeing. And now what Drake is going to do is keep this as something that's on the side, because he at least knows that the material was lazy and a lot of it was filler compared to the rest of what he has done even recently. And again, Drake is doing all of this for the purpose of trying to save his reputation and act like what we are seeing is not as bad as it actually looks. Now really, when it comes to the failure of this album and the way Drake is now pushing it away from himself, really first off, it seems like he set everything up about this record in a manner so just from the branding and optics alone, he would be able to make his fans easily forget about this project and just excuse its failure all in order to save his greater image, or at least that's what Drake thinks. And really, when we saw Drake try to get away with releasing an album this mediocre and boring, we should have known something was up and that he was playing some sort of a game that he could quickly quit from, because from the fact that the album is a collab record with an artist who is much smaller than him, which again, just looking at Drake's track record is something he has never done, is he's always working with an artist who he can gain from in terms of their popularity and in terms of what they can give to the culture that he can't. And of course, by using PartyNextDoor, this gave Drake the excuse of using Party's low numbers from his own albums to try and say why this record is doing much worse than he ever has in the past. And again, adding to this, to the fact that this record is listed as an R&B album, where despite the fact that it really sounds no different than Drake's other records sonically and has a lot of rapping, this is listed as the first Drake album that is not hip-hop to push it as far away from rap, which is the most competitive genre. So once again, it can just have an asterisk that will make people look at it differently. And with these factors setting this album up so that if it failed, Drake could run away as far as he possibly could, now looking at the record's performance, he already has done this, and this is why this record is already being forgotten about by him and why he's ditching music altogether at the moment, because really, we have never seen a Drake album be out for this long without any real music video, and we have never seen Drake drop music and then just run away from the spotlight as much as he possibly can. And so right now with this, it's really clear that Drake is accepting a reality that he has never had to before, where the numbers and the excitement for him of being on top isn't pushing him to just keep doing more in the rap game, and because of this, these low numbers and everything else have discouraged Drake, and overall have now made him go away from everything, because for someone as chart-obsessed and number-driven as him, with this album now losing out on a major #1 spot to Kendrick Lamar's GNX of all albums, Drake does not know how to operate as an artist because he is losing every single thing that even gave him the motivation to make the same old awful and boring records already. And between his lack of skill and creativity, and the lack of just any sort of energy or enthusiasm, Drake is clearly done for now, and any near plans he had on making a comeback are being pushed into a time where everybody will forget about SSS for You, and then he could try to make a comeback all over again. And I mean, when we look back at Drake's catalog, well, I don't know if any album he releases now will ever be remembered well from here on out, because that's how bad of a state he's put his career in. Compared to what's out now, Drake is going to have to do everything he can to make sure that everybody forgets about this record, because again, it's a complete shift and rebrand from what he has represented in the worst way possible. And with Drake thinking this album is awful, he's not losing it because the music itself is necessarily worse than what he has been doing on his past records, but it's the lack of success and now being #2 to Kendrick Lamar that is pushing him to just go back to the drawing board, because even with the advantages that Drake has had, like this album being a new body of work, despite all of that, he has still lost, and it has never looked worse for him because of this. And so what's now clear more than ever is that we are really in a new era in hip-hop, because for Kendrick Lamar to be this dominant that now Drake is literally pushing away his support of his new album because he's embarrassed of how it's doing compared to his, in terms of the long-lasting effects of what this means for hip-hop and its place in the industry, this may be a bigger win than even Kendrick winning the actual beef of things, because with now Drake's failure being solidified by it just staying behind Kendrick at all times, Drake is really devoid of anything that he needed to operate as a rapper, and because of this, hip-hop has never been better off. And so now with all this said, let me know. What do you think about Kendrick managing to do this to Drake this late into when GNX has been out? And what do you think this says about both of their careers and where they are at with the industry as a whole? Now, I can't wait to hear what you have to say. And now, if you made it to this point in the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. And now, if you want to see how in this time, things are looking even more terrible for Drake, because just as Kendrick Lamar said, despite him trying to rig the game, he can't fake influence. And that was something Drake was trying to do before giving up on this album, because that did not work. Check out the suggested video.